Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Sid Mickle Publications. The title of today's video is How to Identify Your Writing Resources. And you can always tell we're going to be serious when I have my notes out early on in the video. In this video, we're going to take a look at how you can find your internal senses and experiences of these key things. In other words, finding your inner motivation, finding subjects that are attached to you and your life and your memories, going back and looking at settings that also stimulate those memories and maybe give you some motivation to write and to write characters from those settings. And the other thing we'll talk about is the discipline it takes to do all those things. One thing I've learned about this new sequence of videos we're going to do, which are basically on the road. In the last 2 weeks, we've been at the downtown Lafayette Martin Theater, going over some memories and in that setting, things that inspired me and motivated me greatly. Well, today we're going to go out and we're going to hit 4 locations from my past that also do that. They also provide me with a strange sense of motivation. There is a bit of melancholy to these locations. Uh, there's a little sense of what I tried to portray in book 1, which is a backwards glance. It's that feeling of looking back at your younger days and the lessons you learned from a lot of very important people. So we're going to take just a few minutes here and look at these 4 locations and then come back and talk about how they have motivated me and maybe how you can take these examples and use them in your own writing, in your own outlining, and in different ways to tap into those inner core strengths you have, which are your own personal life experiences. So here we go. Here's location number 1. Well, everyone, we are at our first location. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined there'd be this much traffic on Highway 431. I didn't live in that building, but I lived right there when I was a kid. And even though these fields seem very small to me as I look at them now, the old fire hydrant I used to play around, where you see that giant clump of trees there, that was my dad's dog pen. Deer dogs, beagles, bird dogs. And I learned how to play and play by myself right here on this property. There were no choices. I had to play here or not play at all because there was nobody else around. And this building right across the street here, it is collapsed, dilapidated, and falling apart, was another spot I spent hours and hours and hours of time riding a bike around these old buildings with the 2 Johnson brothers, 2 bachelors who lived in that house. It just breaks my heart to see it in this kind of condition. Here's where I was motivated to come up with things in my mind to entertain me as a kid. I watched my dad and these 2 old guys sit on that porch, shell peas and butter beans, and talk about all the good times they were having and how life was pretty good for them. And we would look out in the afternoon, and right about where you see those trees, the taller trees, was a railroad track. We would count the rail cars, look at the different things that were on the train, and just imagine what the world was like outside of little town Lafayette. But when we're talking about writing emotions, which are, I think, your inspiration, I think back to this spot for tons of emotion and tons of things that relate to just inspired acts and great people and creativity. It's where I learned to come up with things to not only entertain myself, but just to get through the day and have fun. I played a lot of baseball by myself right there in that field. There were good times here. The old house is long gone. We had gardens on both sides of the house. It was a wonderful place to grow up. My parents worked very hard. And back in the day, my imagination ran wild right here. We're going to move on to location number 2 here in just a second. I didn't really expect to have the emotions that I feel right now. Today just so happens to be my birthday. And this is the site of my grandparents' house. I just spoke of my grandparents' Mickle side. And right there in front of that big oak tree is where their house was. The well pretty much right alongside of that small pine tree. It's the same driveway we used when I was a kid to come visit them. And this old house was a drafty farmhouse with a big front porch. And my grandmother had her canning room in the front where she put up vegetables and preserves and things of that nature. Had a coal stove. And all this property here was a cornfield. So if you remember me talking about the original place, having to use your imagination, there were never any toys here, no bikes, no trucks, no cars, very few books, but a lot of open land. And I could find me a good stick and battle the corn stalks. They would be the army I was going against. So when I think about my writing style, and obviously I am a Southern writer, this is the flavor you get from my writing. This is the setting that inspires me. There's a little bit of nostalgia, there's some melancholy to it, and especially to this place. My grandparents were incredibly loving and kind. In these woods over here, I can remember my grandfather traipsing through the woods in his 60s with me looking for blackberries, strawberries. He was just that generous and just that kind, and it really impacted me, and it still does. This is kind of a special place for me, even though it's very simple. Like I said, when I think about my writing style, it has a lot of the emotion that I remember from these places. And this is what I try to convey in my writing. I try to reach down inside and think about this quiet country dirt road. Well, just to the other side of that driveway was the outhouse. They did not have inside plumbing. That takes you back to some cold winters. But I try to make sure that some of this sentiment, maybe the sentimentality or the feeling that I gathered as a small kid here comes through in my writing. Right just behind me here on the other way of this road is where I wrote the final and kind of ending scene to Kill 'Em All. And other books, Backwards Glance and Who Killed Glenna, cross this road. They go up and down it, and they come through areas just like this. And the great thing about these places, they were filled with wonderful people, generous, friendly, always just outwardly kind and willing to help you in any way. And I remember my parents having great numbers of friends, and everybody just helped each other. That's my memories of growing up. I'm sure there were some more difficult times, but I'm glad those are the ones that stick with me. We have 2 more locations, and we'll be finished wrapping up today's road trip or on location shooting. We're here now at our last site. This magnificent piece of property, magnificent certainly to me, I would guess this is 50 plus acres. This was my Uncle Fred's farm. Uncle Fred was injured in an accident at a local timber company, or I guess a sawmilling operation. He was moving boxcars and the brakes failed. They slammed together, threw him off on the rails, and he broke his neck. When you talk about an inspired person, after recovering from that accident, and I would assume having a settlement, he bought this property. Now, he couldn't walk without having 2 canes. He could barely drive a car without having the little knob on the steering wheel that you turned it. And I remember when he bought it, I asked my dad one day, how is he going to take care of this farm? And my dad said, it's easy. We're going to help him. So for summer after summer, when I was a kid, probably 11 to 13 or 14, I worked here. And I baled hay behind an old black mule pulling a mule pulled rake. And this happens to also be the site or the home place for the main character in my Sam Bennett series books. This is where the Bennett family lived. My characters, my locations, and most of the things I write about in my novel series are generated from real life places just like this. I can remember days being here stacking rocks, as I talked about Sam Bennett doing in one of the novels. As I said, raking hay there, making giant haystacks with the folks who came up and helped my uncle and my dad for the livestock he had. Just beyond that gate, the road turns back to the left, and let's see if I can point it out. Right beside that stand of trees on the right there was where the house was, and it was there for a long, long time. The barn just to the right of that, and a pond right down there. So this is a spectacular spot to me in my memories, and it always will be. As I said, this is where I generate an awful lot of the reality that comes from my writing. And we can all find that if we just look inside ourselves at our past. We got one more spot and we'll wrap up the locations. Well, our last stop of the day takes us to this very simple aluminum sided house. And it's again on busy Highway 431. I apologize for the traffic. Right there by that door, you see the window on the right. That was the living room of my grandparents' house. This is where they moved after leaving the farm. And right there in that room, I read two of the books that impacted me greatly when I was a kid. Someone gave me 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, which is Dick Lawson's book of the Doolittle raids that he participated in. And the other book was The Caine Mutiny by Herman Wouk. Those two books were very important to me, and I remember spending a weekend here. Sorry for the traffic. And reading both of them. So this was one of those spots that just stick in your mind. And if you remember the farm we just looked at, my Uncle Fred owned that. He also owned this small country store. I believe it was a one-pump gas station and just a plain and simple country store that he ran along with owning the farm. When I think about discipline, when I think about motivation and characters, I think of that old man going out, starting a business and owning an 80-acre farm and just being determined to take care of his family. I'll never forget him. And that's why his place and his story is such a part of my story and my writing. Just about everything I remember about him gets worked into one of the novels. And it's because he was one of the most courageous and determined, really disciplined people I ever knew. So that's just a small glimpse at 4 spots here in, again, rural East Central Alabama that I find an awful lot of writing motivation from. Hope you've enjoyed the day on the road. We'll go back and finish this video up in the office. And we're back here at the home office, our YouTube studio, if you will. As you watch those on-site locations, I had this great mindset that I was going to be very eloquent and really put out some heartfelt, great advice from each one of them and talk about how those locations have been worked into the stories I've written for novels for sure. And they've been a part of everything I've written about characters, about settings, plots, timelines. But what really happened today, and it very much surprised me, I struggled emotionally at every one of those sites. And I've been to each one of them 100 times since, living there, living in all of them and being around each of them. That was a very big shock. I found myself really struggling to get the words out and not tear up at these places. But I think that probably is the key to why they are so powerful, why they actually inspire me greatly. Um, they have this almost indescribable and unimaginable impact on me. And I can't tell you why. And in my first book, A Backwards Glance, I think I struggle to get those sentiments, those emotions into words in that book as well. But they were, those places were very critical to me. They were important spots along my life journey to date. And I use things from those locations and the other 15 that we have selected to go visit. Maybe the next 3 or 4, I won't be quite as, I won't struggle as much to get the information that I feel is important out. But I wanted to leave it the way it was. That's raw. That's what it is, and that's who I am. I want to tell you one other thing, and I hope this makes sense to you. I did a little bit of research. In other words, I just went back in and Googled myself and my writing style. I just Googled the writing style of author Sid Mickle. And here's what I found. The description is Sid Mickle is a storyteller at heart. Small town feel with real world complications featuring intricate plots and challenges. The next bullet point was he writes character driven writing inspired by real world people. The next bullet point is there's an exploration of themes in his writing. He examines love and relationships, friends and family. Point 2 was he writes about struggles and resilience. And point 3 was he writes about the consequences of choices. The final thing it said was Mr. Mickle writes with a warm Southern flavor and style. I don't know what a warm Southern flavor and style is, but I like it if that's what I'm doing. I was very flattered by that description. From one standpoint, it matches what I'm trying to get across in everything I've ever written. Every one of these books have characters that I grew up with that were, some of them were a part of my family. Some of them were people that I just knew and interacted with. Others were just people I saw from a great distance. Some I admired and some I didn't admire very much. But that's what life and that's what your experiences are. You build up that library of information. And I'm very lucky. I've said this to you before. I have what I think Wikipedia calls a flashbulb memory. I can go back and pull up an event, a place, a time, a person, and it's just vivid. It's just in color. It's right there as if I was reliving it. And I think that's a great thing for a writer to have because you can go back and try to put those emotions down on paper or in your manuscript. I hope you've enjoyed today. I hope it wasn't too much of a struggle. I'll just have to wait and see how the video plays out with viewership. I certainly enjoyed doing it. I think it's always good to struggle sometimes with things. You think it's going to be one way and you get out in the real world and it's exactly the opposite. You really just have to figure it out as you go. So if you haven't discerned that already about my videos, we are figuring it out as we go almost every week. But my final point here is, look, we all have incredibly valuable writing resources within ourselves, within our memories. And it's not just good memories, it can be bad memories. Those are writing resources. And I've used a lot of those as well. It's not all just, ponies and butterflies. It's tough, real life things sometimes. I hope that we can all just take a step back at times, think about what we bring as human beings, as individuals with our own life experience to a potential story. What characters, and remember, we want to write some flawed characters, and I'm really good at that. I am flawed, and I know a lot of flawed characters. But we also have an opportunity to write very interesting, what I would call page turning plots. And that's the key to readership. That's the key to book sales. So we're going to continue this style. We're not just going to stay in the office and do every video with almost like a studio, classroom lecture style. We're going to continue to go out in the world. Now, it's a relatively close in world here, but over the next few weeks, it may be months, we're going to look at some places and we're going to talk about the individual things that those locations and maybe events, what they provide and how I can use them in writing. And we're all writers. We know where those trouble spots are. We know how we need certain things at different points in our stories. I hope you'll come along with me on this journey, and just maybe we'll uncover some valuable information that will help all of us answer and fix those little complications in our plots and in our stories. So until we get together again, I hope everybody has a great week. I hope you have some fun this week. And I hope you'll come back and see us again when we go on location for another 3 spots that inspired me as a young man. Until then, take care of yourself. We will see you all later. Bye-bye.